One. And very good evening. We are here. Phew, we are running just a few minutes behind. It is about 3 minutes to 6 o'clock. It is Wednesday evening, and we are here for live stream number 34. This is Christopher Duigan, Piano Hour on Wednesday, coming to you now regularly on Wednesday. We've shifted our shows around. We're just a little bit behind. Apologies for that. Normally we start at 10 minutes to 6, so we have got only 3 or 4 minutes before we'll be starting our performance. We're having a few technical challenges here. Some cables did not really want to speak to each other the way they had previously. So welcome, thank you for joining us tonight. Make yourself comfortable. As I said, we'll be starting in a few minutes. Make sure that you are beveraged, seems to be the word that's sticking. And tonight we have an interesting program, I think a very unique program. I've taken a number of requests from people who've responded in the last few days and since we announced this last week, as well as a few WhatsApps and emails of suggestions about pieces they'd like to hear that I haven't played, or pieces that I have played that I'd like to hear again, as well as 1 or 2 answers. Questions and answers, curious things that people would like to know about. So I'm going to try and watch how much I talk, because I realize this is a music performance as well. And I'm going to try and keep the explanations and the talking to a minimum with some wonderful performances in between. Some very unique music you're not going to hear very often coming in tonight's program. And also we might actually run slightly over time. I'm not quite sure how many of the issues I'll be able to talk about and discuss, but certainly if we're here, we might just be running a few minutes over. So once again, if you are able to support us, please do support our online efforts to bring these live streams through to you. As I said, this is number 34. And these streams go out on various platforms for free to everyone, and we have been asking for support and donations, particularly in the last 2 weeks, because now we are in the process of purchasing our own studio equipment to run this performance as it's in the quality that you have been accustomed to, as supplied by Big Beat and Kevin Liddell, who unfortunately will be going off and pursuing his own career and his own business again, of course. So we are looking at purchasing a whole studio setup. We are in the process of actually paying for it. And I would like to thank 2 people who've been incredibly generous, been superbly generous with very substantial and meaningful donations that they have offered us in the last week, and given through one, an anonymous donor in Johannesburg, at least in London, who has given a magnificent amount and sent that through to help us, and another donor in Pretoria who has really been very generous, and we are very grateful to both of them for their support and for their, as I said, generous donations in helping us purchase the equipment. If you are enjoying these streams and you are able to support us, either just by buying a ticket or a monthly amount, we would be very grateful. This evening's program, I was expecting, if you are local and you're living in this KZN Midlands part of the world, I was expecting to hear requests for a couple of pieces like this. Of course, that being the very famous "Smoke Gets in Your Eyes," or even a bit of "Smoke on the Water." For those of you who are living in Pietermaritzburg, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about with the smoke. The dump is on fire once again, can you believe it? And the entire city is consumed and covered in this toxic smoke. So no smoke requests this evening. And we are going to be going straight on to our performance. It has just gone 6 o'clock. And so we are going to start our performance this evening of Piano Hour with myself, Christopher Duigan. Thank you for joining us. We have some very interesting and very wonderful requests, and I hope you're going to enjoy the selection of music. It's been really fascinating for me to hear from you and from you as an audience what pieces that you've really been interested in and what you would like to hear. So I'm going to mention a few names as to who has asked for what. One of our followers, Billy in Hilton, has asked for a selection or to hear something by the composer William Byrd. William Byrd, an English composer whose dates are exactly 1543 to 1623. And that's early Baroque music. And he would have composed music for the harpsichord, virginal, clavichord, etc. And Billy asked, well, what would it sound like if I had to play this music on the piano? Now, the principal difference between these instruments, this is before the piano was invented, is that these instruments were generally a string being plucked by playing a key rather than a hammer striking a key. And the piano has a wonderful ability to, especially the modern piano, to sustain a sound. Whereas with the harpsichord and similar instruments, it's a much more delicate and a much more immediate attack, but not so much sustain. And so I'm going to play two pieces, the first of which is a rather fanciful drinking song. I thought, see, we always talk about being beveraged, having a drinking song called Wolseley's Wild that William Byrd wrote down in a keyboard version, followed by a pavane for the Earl of Salisbury, which you might recognize. And in these pieces, I'm trying to adopt a certain brittle attack on my fingers to create that very unique harpsichord attack sound. And you'll also hear a lot of what we call trill or mordants, which in harpsichord writing allows you to not only sustain a note or to place an accent on it. We'll talk about that a bit later on. So these are two pieces by William Byrd that I'm playing on the piano that should really be played on the harpsichord or similar instrument from the Fitzwilliam Virginal book. going to start this evening's programs, two short pieces. I'm going to remove the magic strap. Two short pieces by the composer William Byrd. Wolseley's Wild, a traditional drinking song that he wrote down in the Fitzwilliam Virginal book, and then also the provided Earl of Salisbury, when the Virginal book being a collection of pieces that was actually given to the Cambridge University Library by the Viscount Fitzwilliam in 1831, a selection of pieces by William Byrd that had been kept in the family for a number of years. And the Virginal just referring to one of the instruments which it might have been played on, the early keyboard instrument. And in this book, it contained a number of pieces that could have been played on the harpsichord, the organ, clavichord, and virginal. So a very regal, gentle English start to the program there with a selection requested by Billy. I'm going to move on to two pieces. Alison and Harry have requested a piece of music called The Rosary by the composer Ethelbert Nevin. I don't know this piece at all. I discovered it yesterday. I found a piano transcription of the song yesterday on the internet, and I'd like to play it for them now. It's a piece that Harry's mother used to play. And straight after that, a composition by the French composer Emmanuel Chabrier for Annette in Pietermaritzburg. Annette asked for anything with a habanera rhythm. I talked recently about the habanera rhythm coming from Havana in Cuba and being so popular in French music. So this is the very beautiful habanera by Emmanuel Chabrier. And the last piece of music requested by Denise in Howick, The Girl with the Flaxen Hair. Very beautiful, tranquil Debussy prelude. magically evocative music there from Claude Debussy with his Girl with the Flaxen Hair from the first book of Preludes. Before that, I played Chabrier's Habanero for Annette and Peter Maritzburg, the Flaxen Hair. I played for Denise and Howick, and I started off that set of 3 pieces with the piece called The Rosary by Ethelbert Nevin for Alison and Gerry. So one of the surprises, big surprises for me, was that actually in the number of people who requested more of my own music, I was really encouraged by the response and the enthusiastic and positive responses that I received to the program from last week, Friday, of my own compositions. And in fact, the one piece, which I played several weeks ago, which has been asked by a number of people, is in fact a composition called Hilton Road. So I'm playing this evening for a number of people, including Liz and Margie, who've requested, 2 of the people who've requested this. Hilton Road, I was thinking, I talked about it, but I was thinking again how unique destination. I'm referring to the road that leads to Hilton College. It's such a unique and a beautiful landscape on that hill overlooking the Midlands Valley, but it's also one of the really unique roads that when you're on that road, there's only one place that you're really going to. I know a few people do live along the road, but you're always on your way to Hilton College, and it's such an incredibly exciting and sometimes daunting destination. As I say, I played some of my very first concerts there and also played many concerts at the Hilton Festival, and it was also, oddly enough, the very first road I ever drove. I can't speak this evening. The very first road I ever drove a car on. Not very well, I have to say. I think my teacher driver was quite terrified when I got to the gates and was going far too fast and had to come to a sudden stop. But it got me thinking about what I was trying to express in this piece of music. And I think what appeals to people is this sort of hymn-like quality of one section, and then this very meditative expression, which sometimes sounds like the Bach Prelude in C, Bach being and I right in the middle section. This very floating, tranquil sound and a melody of a certain amount of melancholy, you might say. And I think what the essence of it is really comes down to how many experiences like this, especially being in school and being in boarding school, I guess, especially, that these experiences are sometimes very like a trial of fire. They feel terrible at the time, and they're also incredible amount of fun and exciting. And when you look back at them at later points in your life, you realize how incredible and fun they were, but they also still seem incredibly frightening and quite full of very difficult experiences. I think that most people can relate to something like that in their life. And so this returning hymns, which comes back again and again in between these sections, seems to be the point at once of a soothing balm and at another moment a sense of upliftment. That was one of my own pieces, which has been requested by a number of people for this evening's program of requests and question and answers. A piece of mine called Hilton Road from the 4KZN Landscapes. Now, Robin in London asked about pedaling. He said she would like to know, I mentioned once about how the pedal works and what the use of the pedal on the piano entails, and wanted to know a little bit more about that, especially as a pianist. He's a pianist and wanted to know where it would be appropriate to use pedal and not. And it's been very interesting to try and figure some of this out. Just to repeat, the pedal, the sustain pedal, the right pedal that we use on the piano, when we push it down, normally a note rings as long as we play it until I let go. And if we push the sustain pedal down, the note keeps ringing. So if I touch any note, those notes will keep ringing until I take the pedal off, or let the sound dies out. Now, the piano being invented in approximately 1700, the first pedal markings, ironically, were used and notated in a score by a gentleman called Ludwig van Beethoven. In one of his piano concertos, number 1 or 2, it seems, he included a number of his very own pedal markings. And at this point, the pedal on the piano was actually operated by a lever underneath the floorboard, or not a keyboard here, which you had to use with your knee to use left or right. And that lifted the dampers. So in a certain place, Beethoven wanted the dampers and all the strings to ring. And he does use it in the sonata, for instance, Opus 31, number 2, where he writes a passage just one note like that, one note at a time, and he wants these notes to ring. What is also interesting, in the opening of the Moonlight Sonata that he writes, in the instructions to the piece, he says the entire composition is to be played without mutes, senza sordini, in other words, for the dampers to be lifted. And on the piano of Beethoven's time, that would have been quite feasible because the notes didn't sustain for as long as they do on the modern piano. So if I had to play it as Beethoven directed, it actually would sound which is not very attractive at all, actually, after the first few seconds. It becomes a bit of a muddle and a bit of a confusing element. So the idea is that one has to understand what Beethoven's intention was and reinterpret them for a contemporary or a modern piano. Chopin was very particular, again, about pedal, and really by the time of Chopin's use, and late Beethoven, the pedal, the foot-operated pedal would have been in action, and Chopin really wanted the beautiful sounds of the piano to ring out, to make the sound, the melodies of his music ring. So for instance, in the very famous Nocturne in E flat, again, if I didn't change the pedal, it would sound which is sort of a very ghostly version of anything. And Chopin would very definitely then mark throughout the piece the change. It's generally always on one harmonic change. Whoa, I can't play this evening. Change. So that these chords are separated. Otherwise, there's a general blur. And by the time we get to the music of Debussy, for instance, it's generally accepted almost the time of the modern piano being invented and at its final state in the early 20th century, that pedal markings are not really included that much unless they are something quite specific. And in Debussy's music, he just includes the fact that he wants notes to be ringing for a certain length of time. So for instance, in the opening of the Sunken Cathedral, without pedal, it would be etc. And instead of marking one long pedal, he gives the notes a very long time, a value, and slurs to imply that they are to be sustained. So it would generally work on every change of the bass note would mean a change of pedal. I always think the best test or the best guide is really to use your ear. The pedal adds soul to the piano. So many pianists have talked about this. Without the pedal, the piano is a rather soulless instrument. And the one little trick, and I realize that one, it might be very apparent because the sound that you're hearing is quite close in the piano and in the room that I'm playing here, is that you can actually hear the piano, the pedal on the string sometimes. If I do this, that's actually me lifting and dropping the pedal. And if I play, for instance, a nocturne, Chopin nocturne, where I want to start with that beautiful sound, if I don't use the pedal at all on the first note, and then only use the pedal, it's a little bit dry. And often what I'll do is try and vibrate the pedal and actually activate the strings into a slight humming and to get them jostling a little bit. I don't know if you can hear the difference between that and the strings are just vibrating ever so slightly to get them active and ready for me to play. So I hope that was a few answers there, and a few answers to the question about pedaling and how it's indicated and how one should use it. I'm going to move on to my selection of music this evening, and I am going to play for you a choice of music which was asked following last week's program about where I included a number of my own pieces that were linked with existing pieces, and someone, Christine from Johannesburg it was, asked and said they really kind of liked that idea. Could I play something else in that vein? So I'm going to play for you another of my pieces from the Songs of Solitude that I created recently, which I think was quite successful, and I'm linking that with the Chopin Prelude in E minor, which I will play before. That was a piece of my own from the Songs of Solitude that I improvised over the first 20 days of lockdown. That was day number 10, a piece of music that I wrote down. You'll see Kevin can focus on them. So Tiu was asking about how I notate these various pieces of music, and I'm not sure if you can actually see, if I hold this up closer to the camera. It's a piece of music that I've actually recorded and played, and I just have a recording on my iPhone. And I generally find that when a piece of music is of a certain interest and there's a certain concrete idea, if I remember what I've done and what I've spontaneously improvised 2 days later, then I think it's something that's worth hanging around with. And once I've recorded it, I often then have to try and refine the idea. I jot down a few very basic notes and chords on a piece of paper, and after that, I then try and fill in the notes and fill in the gaps on the music notation on my computer on a Sibelius system, which I use. And that goes back and forth until I've managed to refine more or less what I'm trying to convey in the music and the simplicity of the idea. It's a really long term and quite complex process. It doesn't happen very quickly, especially entering all the notes. Even though I use a keyboard, I always find that the real-time input of it does not really work. Certainly on my system very well, with the complexity of the chords and the notes and how I play at it. It doesn't seem to recognize my style very well. But after a back and forward of several times, scratching out notes on the paper, I come up with the final version. One of the pieces which was requested this evening, and I know I've played this several times, composition which I believe is in one of the ABRSM examination lists. A piece by several pieces were requested by Leanne in Kloof, and the one which I will be able to play, I was hoping to play something else for you this evening from that list, but the one that I will play for you tonight is the Chopin Fantasy Impromptu, which I believe is in that list of compositions, which many students are playing at the moment. I have played this several times, but it's always such a great piece. I will certainly include it in tonight's program. So this is the Fantasy Impromptu, Opus 66. He celebrated magnificent music from Frédéric Chopin. That's on many people's lists for the current piano examinations, I believe. A piece of music there that I was requested by Leanne and Kloof, and that I included for her students who are playing that composition as well as several others. There were 2 pieces that were also requested, including the Lark by Glinka, which I was hoping to include tonight, but with such short notice, I didn't want to make too much of a mess. I mean, making a mess is one thing, but making a total mess is another thing. I'd rather not do that. I'd rather avoid that if I can possibly do it. Now, a piece of music which has been requested by 2 or 3 people, interestingly enough, is another of the ideas of me improvising on a particular theme, especially a particular theme which is quite well known and popular. And so I am going to include at this point, and this is particularly for Joy and also for Max in Middelburg. Max, who is I think 10 or 11 years old, who sent a request through of a number of pieces that he liked and wanted to hear, and Green Sleeves was one of them. So this is my improvisation on this very old English tune, Green Sleeves. I was also asked by Andrew and Kloof about how I work on my improvisations or how I actually can develop them. And it's such a new idea for me and something that I don't really have any experience with apart from what I do myself. But I always find that if there's a particular chord or a particular sequence of style that I like, or a particular sequence of chords that I like, or I try to figure it out and try to identify what it is that's appealing to my ear. It's really just my ear that I'm using to guide me. And once I find out what it is, I try and play it in as many different keys as possible. I certainly don't improvise in every possible key, but I do find that some keys and the way that your hands will fall on some keys will lend itself to different styles. And when I was just doing a little bit of a test this afternoon, I was trying to figure out which key was going to suit Green Sleeves, and I tried C minor and A minor, and I eventually found E flat minor is the key which is going to work for me. So this might be a slightly different version. It might not be quite what one expects. One of the things that I always like to do with a popular tune like this is to try and find new chords or unexpected ways of adding different chords or different harmonies, you might say, to a tune that everyone knows. So this is going to be a very adventurous and possibly very interesting, maybe even catastrophic, let's not hope. But this is my own take on the very popular tune Green Sleeves for Joy and for Max. Very nice chord there at the end, coming out of the pedals. Very nice sustain of sound. Well, I hope you were intrigued. There was Joy and Max, improvisation, a spontaneous version of Greensleeves. Seemed like a goth undertone to that one. But I hope you enjoyed that, something different to the improvisation. Thank you for your encouragement for those who have supported. The encouragement quota of encouraging me to improvise and also to play my own music is greatly appreciated. I'm going to finish off with, as I said, we're running slightly over time, with a piece of music that Sharon in Durban had suggested. Actually was going to suggest 2 weeks ago when I was playing popular themes that were not for piano, and said that in fact these live stream sessions had really helped her through a very difficult time, being the MOB, and I wasn't sure what the MOB stood for until I figured out, was told it was Mother of the Bride. So I think Sharon, being the Mother of the Bride in this very difficult time, well done to you, and I'm pleased that the live streams came through. And so I am going to in fact play for you the Wedding March by Felix Mendelssohn. Now normally the Bridal March, when the bride appears, that's from Wagner's opera Lohengrin, and often that's used, or the Prince of Denmark's March. Also known as the Trumpet Voluntary, or I've even played on occasion for someone's wedding the opening of Widor's Toccata for organ. If you're getting married and you have a good organist, it's a great piece to have your wedding march. It's Widor's Toccata. But this is Mendelssohn's Wedding March from the Midsummer Night's Dream. Incidental music, music that he wrote to be played in between the scenes and acts of Shakespeare's play. A great fan of Mendelssohn's music was, in fact, Queen Victoria, who knew Mendelssohn well and was, as I say, very fond of his music. So when her daughter, Victoria, got married in, I think, 1850 or 1861, it was chosen that Mendelssohn's Wedding March from the Midsummer Night's Dream was going to be used in the ceremony, and that's one of the reasons. Once the Queen has this in her wedding, her daughter's wedding at least, it certainly adds to a great sense of popularity, and probably the reason why it is so often still used. This is originally for orchestra, so often heard on the organ, and I'm going to give you a very shortened but very straightforward version for piano of Mendelssohn's Wedding March. a bit of a joke. So a very basic, harking back to our program of 100 melodies or whatever it was called, popular melodies that you don't normally hear on the piano. That's me playing the wedding march as used by the royal wedding on Queen Victoria's daughter, Victoria, as written by Felix Mendelssohn for his music to Midsummer Night Dream. Once again, thank you to everyone who's joined us this evening. We've run over a little bit over time, but I hope you've enjoyed the selection of music. It looks like we've got a visitor who might join us. I can hear one of the doggies wanting to come inside. Thank you to everyone who supported us with their financial support, donations that are coming through. We are purchasing and collecting, should be the equipment, our own studio of equipment of very lovely cameras and microphones. It's been great fun and very exciting and very daunting. In fact, doing all the research to find out what we can install in the studio here in my home. I'm going to be carrying on with 2 live stream sessions, certainly every week until the end of the year. And I'm sure even once this lockdown period is over, we are going to be including a number of live streams in our general concerts. So thank you to everyone who has donated, especially our donor who is anonymous from London, and Terry Lynn Harris from Pretoria, who have given us incredibly substantial amounts. And let's see, yes, we do have a visitor. Come, please. Let's see who's coming. Who have we got here? Oh, gosh. Someone went to the park today. Sorry, Kevin. Kevin pointing out the mic. This is little Lucy. And Lucy went to Wiley Park today and I can feel she's full of mud on her feet. Lucy likes to jump into the river. Whenever there's mud and a river around, Lucy likes to have a good jump inside. So Lucy's come to say hello to everyone this evening. Lucy, the long-haired Dachshund. Maybe we'll meet the others. They also get a little bit shy. Maybe one day they'll join us. So just a reminder, this has obviously been our new time slot on Wednesday for Piano Hour every week. Regular classical concert will be with us on Saturday evening at 6 p.m. I'll be playing more Mozart from the C minor sonata, more from the Schumann Fantasy, the magnificent, really magnificent slow movement, the third movement from the Fantasy, beautiful etude by Franz Liszt, Harmonie du Soir, as well as music by Claude Debussy. So it's going to be a really brilliant, wonderfully spectacular program, very sincere and heartfelt music for Saturday in Grand Classics, Volume 2. Thank you for joining us, thank you for supporting us, and thank you to Kevin Liddell again, who's been running the show and supporting the equipment for this live stream. We look forward to seeing you on Saturday. Stay well, keep warm, and look after yourselves. I'm going to have a quick look to see who's joining us on Facebook. Hello, Hilary Kromberg. Yes, lovely to see you. Margot Sennett Friedman. Yes, that is Lucy. Justin Dutoy and family, thank you for joining us. Adele Cohen Branch, thank you for coming along. Mark Bodley, Ida Eurster, you managed to join us. Yes, you are normally only with us on a Saturday evening. Please, you could join us on a Wednesday night. Julie Dardle in Turkey, thank you so much. Brigitte Simpson, again, thank you for your support. And everyone else who's joining us tonight, thank you for coming along. We look forward to seeing you on Saturday.